How's it going, everyone? Welcome back. The Cincinnati Bengals are without question in a much different position today than they were a week ago prior to free agency starting. We wasn't quite sure where the Bengals are going to go in free agency, but I'll tell you what, they come out there, they attack the tackle, they get a veteran safety. There's still talk swirling about bringing in a potential tight end, and these guys coming in absolutely game changing for the Cincinnati Bengals entering the 2023 NFL draft. And because of that, do we say, hey, do the Bengals' top needs here, do they change entering the draft now, coming in at number 28? There's a couple pieces here, obviously. First of all, Jonah Williams, you're going to trade this guy. I tell you what, I love more and more I think about it. He don't want to be here. I can understand why really the Bengals hold all the cards here when you stop and think about it. I mean, this guy once traded, but he's got to play. If the Bengals don't trade him, he's got to fight his rear end off to try and play because he did not have a very good season last year or the season before. And if he's trying to be a starter somewhere, he's trying to get that money, he's going to go out there and try to do the very best he can on a contract year for the Bengals. Bengals could get a lot out of him this year. Probably his best season potentially. Maybe he does better after that, but that's what he's looking to do. But at the same time, you say, oh man, you bring in a third round pick for this guy possibly. You take that third, you trade up from 28. If you see some of your guys on the board, maybe at 23, 24, and you want to reach up there and make sure you get them, it don't sound too bad of an idea. Maybe get a little higher up there. I kind of like it. But looking at things now, I think it's crazy because you wonder how much changed because of Jonah Williams leaving. They still need a tackle. But I think you look at things now and you see the way the Bengals worked free agency. They attacked a lot of the holes, a lot of the needs, a lot of the concerns. And now they have the ability to really go into this draft and say, let's draft the best available minus skill position players, of course. Like, if you've watched and followed us enough, you know, we're not a big fan of drafting running back. We're not going to draft a wide receiver. Bengals don't need a wide receiver. Not a fan of the running back. Really not a fan of taking a tight end in the first round. It's a deep tight end draft. And why? Laporta looks nice. Laporta is very appetizing to me. Bring him on in. That being said, you say, well, they need an offensive lineman, defensive lineman. You can bring in another safety just in case. 3 years. Nick Scott, what's going to happen there? If that's available. The CB is always a nice position. That's available. But I tell you what. I think if you're the Bengals and you're looking at this draft, you're thinking ahead here. And if available, and now that you have the offensive line shored up a little bit, it would be great still. I still think offensive line. I still think defensive line. I still think offensive and defensive line remain the top priorities for this team. You look there first. You don't want to reach for any of these guys. I think that's the beauty of where they're at now. They're not in that position where they have to reach for these guys. They can draft best available if somebody else slides down the board that they want. Again, could be a secondary guy. You can go after him. But I think you look and say, first of all, you want to get a stud out of the draft as a tackle if you can. Because look at the Chiefs. Again, you want to follow the Chiefs recipe, you can. You want to follow somebody else's, you can. But you look at what the Chiefs just did. They brought in 2 rookie linemen last year. One's a Pro Bowler this year, second year. I mean, look at the difference it makes because you're paying these young, talented linemen very, very little for the first 4 or 5 years of their career. Compared to if you want to continue to try to sign vet after vet after vet, that's going to be pricey every single time. You look at the guys the Bengals bring in, even like a Collins, how much you have to pay to bring a guy like him in compared to drafting somebody, and you get average to above average play out of a tackle for 4 years on that entry level deal. Oh, you got to jump all over that. I think you look the same way from a defensive line standpoint. When you draft in the first round, I think you don't just look at your position needs. I mean, you obviously need to if there's a gaping hole. But if you don't have that gaping hole, you say, okay, now let's talk about money. There's a couple reasons I'm not a big fan of taking a tight end in the first round. First of all, run blocking tight ends are not expensive. If they need one in free agency, you get one of them and just get somebody that can catch a football. And Joe Burrow is going to give this guy 400 or 500 receiving yards this season. I think that's why I love the idea of Morrow is not a perfect example because I think he's a great catcher. But, you know, bringing in Morrow is a great idea because, $4 or $5 million for him or guys like that. And you put these guys on 3-4 year deals, you're going to get a steal out of that. And again, $4 or $5 million. If you want an average offensive lineman that's a good run blocker, you're not getting $4 or $5 million, not a tackle. You're going to be paying 10 plus. Or if you want, again, what was it? Was it Juju? Did Juju just go for 10 plus million a year? I don't think he's worth it that late in his career. But again, wide receiver position, they're worth that much more as free agents. Defensive lineman, same story. You're going to pay 14, 10, 15 million a year for an above average lineman. I think the price is just so much higher for those guys compared to an average to above average tight end. For that reason, you say the value, you just got to find one for agency for cheaper. And you got to consider when you're putting that kind of draft capital, if you can cash in on a guy that's going to possibly be a really good player and a really good player at that position. Again, now we're talking 15, 20 plus million at some of these positions. And you lock him down for 4 years on a cheap contract on a team that is worried so much about their salary cap because they're going to wrap up about 110 million probably in Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, and T. Higgins over the next 4 or 5 years. You go all in on that. That's a big deal. Again, what's more important, that 15 million savings at left tackle or that 6 million you might go put on a tight end? And for that reason, that's why I say you go in the trenches. And the other thing here the Bengals have to consider, and I think what a lot of us have to really be thinking about here, is the way the Bengals draft. Not just priorities, but the way they draft. DJ Reader, contract expiring soon. That is a massive loss for the Bengals on the interior part of that defensive line. It was a completely different defense when he's healthy. The guy's been an absolute stud, a run-blocking machine. Love the guy, but he's going to be on a third-year contract, and we know how the Bengals are with third-year contracts. Will they re-sign DJ Reader? I don't know, frankly. I do know they're probably looking at that and saying, hey, if we can get a top 3 on the board interior defensive lineman or a guy we really, really like at number 28, I think they'd go after it. And then again, you have that replacement. If you don't have that replacement, at the very least, I mean, the guy's going to play because you can substitute the four and substitute on. Keep your guys fresh, which is also a big thing for the defensive line. And again, an edge rush. The Bengals, by no stretch of the imagination, were some dominant pass rushing team last season. You got a chance to grab one of those in the first round. You go all in on that as well. You go all after it. I think you say tackle. I think you say defensive line. I think those are still your top 3 priority kind of area for the Bengals. Well, you throw CB in there as well. Tackle, offensive line, CB. Because again, you're playing the future game here. Those are still at the top of your list. But again, I think they're in a position where you can say, hey, we don't have to force this. And we can still go best available in our minds and grab best available if somebody else is sticking out in another position and make that work. Overall, though, I don't think too much has changed, other than the fact that there's not a lot of pressure now. I don't think the pressure is near as high as it was a week ago for the Bengals to have to drop that offensive lineman. I still think, though, you talk about bringing in DeWine. Ohio State's tackle there. It could very well happen. I think you might go up further in the draft, though. That's where you say, hey, bringing that third-round pick for Jonah Williams might be nice. But I'm still looking in the trenches for the Bengals. I still think that's the way to go. You sign a tight end. Go in the trenches in the draft. If not, again, even if you don't sign a tight end, there's going to be a lot of good ones in the second, a lot of good ones in the third. And I think that's the thing with a lot of these other positions that they can potentially target. They want to get a safety in the second or a safety in the third as an insurance policy in case they aren't feeling good about Nick Scott starting, or if they sign another safety in free agency still. Same about the CB position. The Bengals, look what they just did with Cam Taylor-Britt. They've been doing a pretty good job drafting lately. Sometimes we just have to trust this team can draft some of these players in the later rounds. We'll see, though. Love to hear your guys' thoughts. Thank you guys for watching. We'll see you next time.